$480 million. Gone. Vanished into thin air by a man who convinced the world's smartest investors that he was their financial savior. Right now, as you're watching this video, Sheikh Khalid Al Farik is somewhere on this planet, living off money stolen from retirees, hedge fund managers, and tech entrepreneurs who trusted him with their life savings. The FBI has placed a $15 million bounty on his head, making him one of the most wanted financial criminals alive. But here's what terrifies me most about this case, and what should keep you awake at night. Have you ever trusted someone because they spoke well, dressed impeccably, and seemed to know all the right people? Have you ever made a financial decision because someone with an impressive background promised you returns that seemed too good to refuse? Do you know someone who's fallen victim to sophisticated financial manipulation? This isn't just another story about greed. This is about how one man weaponized charm, international connections, and the global financial system to create the perfect trap. A trap so sophisticated that former European parliamentarians, New York hedge fund kings, and Qatari royal families all walked straight into it with their eyes wide open. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how Sheikh Al Farik pulled off this massive deception, where investigators believe he's hiding right now, and most importantly, how to protect yourself from becoming his next victim. Before we go any further, if you value content that could literally save your financial future, smash that like button right now. And if you're serious about learning how these predators operate, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. Here's something that bothers me: if you're not subscribed to this channel, you're missing cases that could protect your own financial future. Every week, we expose criminals who are actively hunting for their next victims. Don't let that next victim be you. The year was 2017. In the glittering towers of downtown Dubai, whispers traveled through marble-floored conference rooms and crystal-adorned penthouses. Whispers about a man whose wealth appeared limitless, whose appetite for risk made Wall Street traders look conservative, and whose rise contained secrets too dark to survive international scrutiny. That man would soon become the centerpiece of the largest cross-border fraud investigation in modern history. And today, he remains a ghost, protected by multiple passports, shell companies, and the kind of money that makes entire governments look the other way. This is the story of how Sheikh Khalid Al Farik stole nearly $500 million and disappeared into the shadows of international finance. Born into privilege in Sharjah during the late 1970s, Khalid Al Farik entered the world as the second son of a shipping magnate whose wealth traced back generations. But unlike his peers who quietly entered family businesses, Khalid possessed something far more dangerous: extraordinary charisma combined with ruthless ambition. By his 20s, he spoke 6 languages fluently. His degrees from London and Geneva weren't just certificates on a wall, they were weapons he used to position himself as the perfect bridge between Western financial culture and Middle Eastern capital pools. The warning signs were there from the beginning, hidden in plain sight. Childhood friends later recalled how Khalid would convince other students to loan him money for investments that never materialized. Teachers remembered his ability to talk his way out of any situation, no matter how damning the evidence against him. At 32, he founded Farik Holdings with a simple but devastating strategy: create an empire so impressive, so globally connected, that questioning its legitimacy would seem absurd. The company claimed interests in luxury resorts, aviation startups, and cryptocurrency platforms. At its peak, Farik Holdings was valued at over $2.5 billion. International business magazines featured him on their covers. He attended high-profile conferences alongside Dubai's ruling elite. Financial journalists praised his vision for connecting Middle Eastern wealth with Western innovation. He wasn't just building a business, he was crafting the perfect disguise. Red flags that should have stopped everyone cold were explained away with smooth words and impressive connections. Why were his company's board meetings held in different countries every month? Global perspective, he'd say with that famous smile. Why did his financial statements seem deliberately complex? Sophisticated international tax optimization, his army of lawyers would explain. The most chilling detail? He hired former compliance officers from major banks, not to prevent fraud, but to understand exactly how regulatory systems worked, and how to game them. Drop a comment below and tell me, what red flags would you have spotted? Because I guarantee you, some of these warning signs exist in companies you've heard of today. By 2016, his empire stretched across continents, with shell companies scattered through the Cayman Islands, Malta, and Cyprus. But beneath the glossy facade of cliffside resorts and Manhattan boardroom presentations, Khalid was preparing for his masterpiece, a scam so audacious that it would make Bernie Madoff look like a small-time pickpocket. The foundation was set. The reputation was built. International investors were lined up like lambs heading to slaughter. All he needed now was the perfect product to sell them. If you're not subscribed yet, you're making the same mistake his victims made, ignoring obvious signs right in front of you. Don't be the person who learns about these criminals after they've already struck. Subscribe now for protection you can't get anywhere else. What happened next would change everything. In 2017, Sheikh Al-Farouq launched what he called the Crescent Fund, an investment vehicle marketed as the ethical choice for wealthy individuals who wanted to make money while saving the world. It was the perfect trap. The Crescent Fund launched with the kind of marketing campaign that makes even seasoned investors weak in the knees. Ethical Tech Innovation Fund, for words that promised everything wealthy people wanted to hear. Double-digit returns. Moral superiority. Access to cutting-edge technology startups. But here's what made this scam absolutely diabolical: Al-Farouq didn't target desperate people looking for quick money. He went after the smartest, most sophisticated investors on the planet. People who had survived multiple market crashes, who had teams of advisors, who thought they were impossible to fool. His first victims included hedge fund managers controlling billions in New York. Wealthy families from Qatar who had weathered every financial storm in modern history. A former European parliamentarian whose political connections made him ultra-cautious with money. These weren't naive retirees responding to email spam, these were financial predators being outpredated by someone even more ruthless. The marketing was flawless. Crescent promised to funnel capital into green energy startups across Europe and North America. Every presentation included detailed breakdowns of solar panel manufacturers in Denmark, wind farm developers in Texas, and battery technology companies in Germany. The documentation looked perfect because Al-Farouq had hired actual engineers and environmental consultants to create it. Here's how sophisticated this operation was: he didn't just create fake companies. He created fake entire supply chains. Fake component suppliers that sold to fake manufacturers that shipped to fake distributors that sold to fake end customers. The level of detail was so overwhelming that even experienced due diligence teams couldn't process it all. Investment meetings took place in 5-star hotels across 3 continents. Al-Farouq would arrive with 7 advisors, quote Shakespeare during presentations, and treat staff with the kind of politeness that billionaires rarely display. One victim later described him as the kind of man who makes you feel guilty for not trusting him immediately. The minimum investment was $10 million. The maximum was unlimited. Wealthy investors competed for larger allocation sizes, afraid they'd be locked out of the opportunity of a lifetime. For 2 years, everything appeared perfect. Quarterly reports arrived on schedule, showing steady returns. Site visits were arranged to operational facilities. Video calls were scheduled with startup founders who answered technical questions with impressive expertise. The first crack appeared in late 2019, and it was so small that most people missed it entirely. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless. For the next week, Sarah carried her secret like a precious, fragile treasure. She went through the motions of her daily life, performing surgeries, attending meetings, having dinner with Marcus, all while knowing that everything had changed. She found herself studying Marcus with new eyes. The way he barely looked up from his phone during dinner. How he'd started sleeping on his side of the bed, careful not to touch her even accidentally. The way he'd begun talking about space and finding himself. Meanwhile, Sarah's body was already beginning to change. The morning nausea she'd attributed to stress from work took on new meaning. The exhaustion she'd blamed on long hospital hours suddenly made perfect sense. And for the first time in months, when she looked in the mirror, she saw hope in her own eyes. But the hardest part was the joy. The pure, overwhelming joy that she had to hide from the one person she'd always shared everything with. She wanted to shout it from the rooftops, to call her mother, to celebrate this miracle that she'd prayed for every night for 2 years. Instead, she scheduled another appointment with Dr. Rodriguez for the following week, and began to plan for a conversation that would either save her marriage or end it forever. But the opportunity came sooner than expected. Marcus came home early from work on a Thursday evening, something he hadn't done in months. Sarah was in the kitchen, preparing dinner and fighting a wave of morning sickness that had decided to make an evening appearance. "Sarah, we need to talk," Marcus said, and she knew from his tone that the moment she'd been dreading had arrived. They sat in their living room, the same room where they'd planned their wedding, where they'd dreamed about their future children, where they'd held each other through the disappointments of failed fertility treatments. "I think we both know this isn't working," Marcus began, his voice carefully controlled. "We've grown apart. We want different things. I think it's time we were honest about that." Sarah felt the baby, their baby, like a secret heartbeat inside her chest. "What are you saying, Marcus?" "I'm saying I think we should separate. Take some time apart. Figure out what we really want from life." The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Sarah looked at the man she'd loved for 4 years, the man whose child she was carrying, and realized she was looking at a stranger. "Is there someone else?" she asked quietly. Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It's not about someone else. It's about us. About how we've become people we don't recognize." But Sarah saw the truth in his eyes. There was someone else. Liquid assets could be converted to untraceable luxury goods in a matter of hours. The web extended far beyond personal enrichment. Evidence later emerged suggesting Al-Farik was laundering money for organized crime syndicates across Eastern Europe and South Asia. The system was breathtakingly simple: dirty money would enter through one of his 147 shell entities, get invested in phantom businesses, and cycle back out appearing completely clean. Stop scrolling and share this video right now. Your friends and family need to understand these tactics exist. Every person who watches this could be someone who avoids becoming a victim. Don't be selfish with information that could save someone's life savings. Each shell company was registered in a different jurisdiction, creating a legal maze that would take years for law enforcement to navigate. A fake IT startup in Estonia owned by a Maltese trust. The Maltese trust controlled by a Panamanian law office. Payments ultimately directed to accounts in Zurich under the guise of consultancy fees. But Al-Farik's biggest mistake was getting greedy with the wrong people. When you steal from pensioners and middle-class families, you might avoid serious law enforcement attention for years. When you steal from hedge fund managers who have direct connections to federal agencies, you accelerate your own destruction. By early 2020, complaints from American investors had triggered something Al-Farik never saw coming: the full attention of the FBI's International Corruption Unit. The hunt was about to begin. Behind the headlines and international investigations were real people whose lives were systematically destroyed by someone they trusted completely. Robert and Linda Chen, a retired American couple from California, lost $8 million, their entire life savings accumulated over 40 years of working and careful investment. Robert had been an aerospace engineer, Linda a high school principal. They weren't naive. They had survived the dot-com crash, the 2008 financial crisis, and multiple market corrections. Their investment in Crescent Fund came after months of due diligence and consultation with financial advisors they'd worked with for decades. "We chose Crescent because we wanted our money to do good in the world," Linda later told investigators. "Khalid convinced us we could make money while fighting climate change. It felt like the responsible choice. The German hedge fund that invested €90 million into Crescent Fund collapsed entirely when the fraud was exposed. 40 employees lost their jobs overnight. The fund's pension obligations became worthless paper. Families who had worked for the company for years suddenly faced financial ruin through no fault of their own. But perhaps the most heartbreaking victim was Maria Kostova, a Bulgarian tech entrepreneur who had sold her successful software company and invested $12 million, her entire business proceeds, into what she believed was a pathway to supporting the next generation of environmental innovators. He didn't feel like a salesman, Maria explained in a later interview. He walked into meetings with 7 advisors, quoted Shakespeare, and treated staff with the kind of politeness billionaires rarely display. He wasn't just selling investments. He was selling the illusion of safety under his name. Have you ever been manipulated by someone who seemed impossibly trustworthy? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story could help someone else recognize these warning signs before it's too late. The psychological manipulation was as sophisticated as the financial fraud. Alferic had studied his victims carefully, understanding that wealthy, intelligent people are most vulnerable when approached by someone who appears even wealthier and more intelligent than themselves. He made each victim feel special, chosen, part of an exclusive group that had access to opportunities ordinary investors would never see. The higher the minimum investment, the more desirable the opportunity seemed. But while victims struggled to rebuild their shattered lives, law enforcement agencies across 3 continents were building the case that would ultimately put Alferic on the run. The FBI's International Corruption Unit doesn't get involved in ordinary fraud cases. When Special Agent Daniel Barrett received the Alferic file in early 2020, he knew immediately that this was something unprecedented in scope and complexity. Working alongside Interpol and the UK's Serious Fraud Office, Barrett's team faced a challenge that would test the limits of international law enforcement cooperation. They weren't just tracking stolen money. They were trying to map a financial shadow network that stretched across 6 jurisdictions, each with strict banking secrecy laws designed to prevent exactly the kind of investigation they needed to conduct. It was like trying to track a shadow, Barrett later admitted to congressional investigators. Every lead ended in a mailbox address with no employees, no board meetings, no business activity. Yet wire transfers worth tens of millions passed through those accounts weekly. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Alferic's own arrogance. He had been so confident in his shell company network that he'd used the same Zurich-based legal firm to establish entities across multiple jurisdictions. When Swiss authorities finally agreed to cooperate with the investigation, that single law firm became the thread that unraveled his entire operation. Bank records revealed the stunning scope of the fraud. At least 147 shell entities tied to Ferric Holdings. Money trails that stretched across continents, touching accounts in 12 different countries. Wire transfer patterns that made clear this wasn't just about stealing from investors. This was a money laundering operation serving organized crime syndicates across Eastern Europe and South Asia. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing than simple fraud. Alferic had been using stolen investor money to purchase political influence across Europe, funneling several $million into campaign contributions that bought not just favor, but protection from regulatory scrutiny. This wasn't just a financial crime anymore. This was a threat to the stability of the international financial system itself. The case had become a priority for law enforcement agencies across 3 continents. But while investigators worked to map his empire, Alferic was preparing for his final escape. March 15, 2021. A London court issued a comprehensive freezing order on all assets tied to the Crescent Fund and Ferric Holdings. Bank accounts across 12 jurisdictions were locked. Property seizure orders were prepared. Arrest warrants were being finalized. Sheikh Khalid Alferic had perhaps 72 hours before his entire world would come crashing down. He used them well. The last confirmed sighting was security footage from Dubai International Airport, showing a man matching Alferic's description boarding a private Bombardier Global 6000, registration number traced to a Cayman Islands company that investigators later discovered had been created just weeks earlier. Where that plane landed remains one of the greatest mysteries in modern international law enforcement. Flight tracking data shows the aircraft's transponder was disabled 4 hours into the flight, somewhere over the Arabian Sea. 3 years later, rumors about his location continue to circulate through intelligence communities across multiple continents, each more intriguing than the last. Russian oligarchs with connections to Al-Farik have hinted that he leveraged old favors to secure safe haven in a country that doesn't extradite financial criminals to Western law enforcement. Some investigators believe he purchased citizenship in a nation whose passport allows travel to over 150 countries without visa requirements. Indian Ocean fishermen operating near the Maldives have reported spotting a 200-foot luxury yacht with an armed security detail, anchored in international waters where no national authority can legally board or inspect. Marine tracking systems show no record of such a vessel, suggesting sophisticated electronic countermeasures. Perhaps most intriguing are reports from an investigative journalist who claims Al-Farik was seen purchasing property in Venezuela under a false identity, taking advantage of that country's economic chaos and weak law enforcement cooperation with international agencies. If you haven't liked this video yet, you're not helping us expose more criminals like this. Every like helps this content reach someone who might need to see it. Don't be the person who learns valuable information but won't take 2 seconds to help others find it too. The FBI's $15 million reward for information leading to Al-Farik's arrest represents one of the largest bounties ever placed on a financial criminal. But for a man who allegedly stole nearly $500 million, $15 million might not be enough incentive to betray him. Intelligence analysts believe he's living under multiple false identities, moving between safe houses in countries that either can't or won't cooperate with American law enforcement agencies. But here's what terrifies investigators most: they believe he's still operating. Still running scams. Still stealing money from new victims who have never heard the name Sheikh Khalid Al-Farik. Today, as you're watching this video, Sheikh Khalid Al-Farik remains a free man. The FBI's $15 million bounty has generated thousands of tips, but none have led to his capture. Interpol's Red Notice has made him theoretically unwelcome in 194 countries, but in practice, money talks louder than international law enforcement requests. The global hunt for Al-Farik has become more than a law enforcement pursuit, it's a symbol of the fight against borderless corruption in an interconnected world where capital moves faster than justice can follow. His victims continue to battle through international courts, trying to recover assets that were converted to untraceable luxury goods and hidden across multiple jurisdictions. Some have recovered pennies on the dollar. Many will never see their money again. But this story offers lessons that could protect you from becoming the next victim of sophisticated financial predators. Sophistication is not the same as legitimacy. The more complex an investment appears, the harder it becomes to verify its authenticity. Al-Farik weaponized complexity to hide simple theft. Trust, but verify independently. Every victim in this case had access to advisors, attorneys, and due diligence resources. But they all relied on information provided by Al-Farik's organization instead of conducting completely independent verification. Be suspicious of exclusivity. When someone makes you feel special for being offered an investment opportunity, ask yourself why they're limiting access. Real opportunities don't need artificial scarcity to attract smart money. If the returns seem too good to be true, they probably are. Crescent funds promised double-digit returns in low-risk green energy investments should have been an immediate red flag for experienced investors. Subscribe to this channel right now if you want to learn about more cases like this. Every week, we expose criminals who are actively hunting for their next victims. Don't let that victim be you or someone you care about. The hunt for Sheikh Khalid Al-Farik continues. Until he's captured, the $480 million scandal will remain a gaping wound in the narrative of Dubai's financial ascendancy and a reminder that in our interconnected world, the most dangerous criminals are often the ones who look most respectable. If you learned something today that could protect your financial future but won't subscribe to get more of this content, comment below and tell us why. We genuinely want to understand what's stopping you from protecting yourself with knowledge that could save your life savings. The case remains open. The hunt continues. And somewhere out there, Sheikh Khalid Al Farik is probably planning his next move.